So, quick rewind on Lego, the lovable and hateable toy of all of our lives. This is a family company that started in Denmark in the 1930s, moved into plastic bricks in the late 40s, and then spent decades positioning itself as a kid system of play.
We talked about the Lego movie. That whole movie was about what we're talking about. But the message was about open-ended play and having an open mind and being flexible and accepting. The end scene where the kid is like, "Dad, I just want to play." And the dad had forgotten. I do think at the crux of what we're trying to solve is that tension.
We're talking about the demographic, and I think it's really interesting. We talk about the last 75 years. We can't deny that people aren't having as many kids anymore. A business who is centered around toys for children, but if people aren't having as many children, so the Lego kind of disappears and you're losing some of what kind of the inheritance of Lego structures.
You kind of know at this point, you can't ignore an adult audience that wants in. Nostalgia play, or if it's the experience I had as a kid, and I'll throw some money at you as long as you make something I like. You can't say no to that.
Welcome to We Fixed It. You're welcome. The show where we take over companies, you come along for the ride, and we try to put them back better than we found them.
We were thinking about a topic for today's episode, and then it just clicked. Let's talk about Lego. That's right, those colorful little blocks that are fun to play with and painful to step on. We're giving them our full attention. And the reason is that the Lego company, until somewhat recently, has built its entire identity around kids. Learning, creativity, imagination for kids. And suddenly, here come the nostalgic grown-ups who want Lego too. And they have the big bucks. We're going to decide whether embracing the thriving market segment of Lego adults is just good business or whether it's gone off the rails. What about the children? Well, we're going to figure this out. With me, we've got Melissa, who specializes in operations and customer experience, Chino, who focuses on global recruitment, talent, and corporate culture. We've got me on marketing, and someone else is here to play. I'd like to introduce Leo Battersby. Leo is a former Mattel executive and one of the brains behind Mattel Creations, aka Mattel Collectibles for Adults. They're super cool. And he knows his way around tapping into a market of grown-up toy fanatics. So I bet he's going to have a lot to say here. But first, Leo, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here. So yeah, I worked at Mattel for 3 or 4 years, started Mattel Creations with Richard Dixon, the president at that time. And we took that from zero to $110 million. And, you know, when I say zero, we were the first to introduce Shopify to the business. That was new. So from the ground up, you know, retooling the studio, building a team around the creative, building a copy core to build a narrative around the brand. So it was a very ground up enterprise in that way for what is otherwise a 75-year-old company. A lot of tension there, a lot of fun things to talk about. Before that, I spent a lot of time in the agency world, doing a lot of brand strategy, brand foundation. I actually was introduced to Mattel during a brand strategy project for Hot Wheels, which involved ages and stages and the way kids play from 2 to 3, 3 to 5, or 5 to 7. So there's some interesting stuff to talk about there today, I think, with respect to Lego. And since then, I've started my own helmet company called Midnight Rally Club, and I'm also the VP of Brand Creative at a startup called Fluid Logic, which is an algorithmic performance hydration brand here in El Segundo.
Oh, very cool. Well, thanks, Leo. It's great to have you with us, and we're going to need you for this and all your expertise in all those areas. Melissa, the floor is yours. And like many of our listeners, that floor has got Lego pieces all over it. So why don't you get us going?
So, quick rewind on Lego, the lovable and hateable toy of all of our lives. This is a family company that started in Denmark in the 1930s, moved into plastic bricks in the late 40s, and then spent decades positioning itself as a kid system of play. Creativity, problem solving, building whatever's in your head and in your mind, not just what's on the box or in that little tiny pamphlet. Even today, if you go to their brand page, the language is still very much play well, free play, fun, learning, caring, quality. And it's all about making a positive difference in children's lives and creating playful learners for life. That's the official story they're telling the world. But what's changed is the money picture. You know what? You grow up. It's not a nonprofit. So over the last few years, Lego's still growing, but not at the same insane pace it had been in the early 2020s. Revenue was basically flat to low single-digit growth in 2023, and profit dipped a bit as they poured more cash into these big strategic bets like digital and sustainability. Then 2024 and into 2025, they really bounced back to double-digit growth and record revenue, helped by the strong demand in Americas and Europe. And a lot of that momentum is coming from bigger, more complex, more expensive sets and these new experiences. So it's not surprising that over the last decade, they've really leaned into adults, launching Adults Welcome, rolling out these 18 plus sets in sleek black boxes, stacking on licensed IP and high price points, and tapping into the adult disposable income and fandom as a serious growth engine, not just a side hobby. On top of that, they're investing in tech like Smart Play and Smart Bricks and making big, very visible sustainability moves like swapping all that internal plastic bag for paper, which parents and kids love, and which we're also spending heavily behind. So that's the tension we're poking at today. When you put it all together, adults as a growth segment, tech-heavy bricks, premium collectibles, does the chase for adult money and these wow moments start to strain a mission that's supposed to be about kids, open-ended creativity, and tactile analog play? Or is this just Lego finally admitting the obvious? The kids who grew up with Lego never really left, and now they're footing the bill for the next generation. Let's talk. Let's build.
Well, Leo, I mean, we kind of know at this point you can't ignore an adult audience that wants in, right? If it's a nostalgia play, or if it's, I missed that and I missed the experience I had as a kid, and I'll throw some money at you as long as you make something I like. You can't say no to that, right?
You can't. I mean, when I was at Mattel, when we were starting Mattel Creations, I want to say that the adult collector segment was about 25% of the market at that time. And so this is during COVID, and maybe it spiked during COVID because we were all stuck at home, and we could build, play with toys while we were on Teams with our camera off. But I think since then it might be 25 or 30% of the market. I know that it is growing, and it's not really waning even after COVID. So you can't ignore the market. And I've spent a lot of time with C-suites doing brand foundation, brand strategy stuff. And the one, as much as we need it to be a purposeful foundation, as much as we need to motivate our culture and hold ourselves accountable to doing the right things for the right reason, any brand foundation that forces you to say no to a lot of money isn't a good brand foundation. It just isn't. Now, that doesn't mean you say yes to every opportunity. A good no. I mean, we've all heard the Steve Jobs thing, saying no was the best thing ever did. But you can't ignore where culture is going. As a consumer brand, you can't do it. Engaging with the adult toy collector, I don't think unto itself is a negative. And frankly, as a toy brand, I don't think you can ignore it at this point. I think that, if you do that, you're sacrificing 25% of your market share. We did a lot of work. We called it the principles of play, specifically related to their track sets around these different ages and stages. When they're 2 years old, they're crashing and bashing, and that's kind of it. They're just smashing stuff and seeing if they can make it fly, and they're exploring, right? They're just getting, when you're that young, you're basically a sponge, and it's like you're on an acid trip and you're just taking everything in, right? Like you don't have your own identity yet. You're just this little sponge. And then you move into, okay, let's make this more interesting with some rules and some competition, and you start structuring it a bit, and then you move all the way up into emulation and developing an identity, and maybe you're into hot rods and maybe you're not. And so there was a lot of work that went into that and into that thinking and that strategy. And it was all about managing open-ended play against a product.
I love what you're saying, Leo, because I feel like what you're saying is the difference between paint by numbers and a blank canvas. My son is still, I mean, he's an adult now, but avid Lego builder. And one of the things we found so fascinating was how he would take a piece and reimagine it into something else. Yeah. And so I remember the first time he built a race car, he used a tile that was used for a roof for the front, like fender right? Like a triangle tile there. And so I feel like you're very right, because I feel like Lego with the sets, which are super expensive, don't get me wrong, and they're amazing, but like a Harry Potter set, a Star Wars set, you're building the Millennium Falcon, whatever you're doing, is so rigid in this is how you build it. And if you don't put this little round one in here, it's not going to fit. And it doesn't allow for that creativity.
It's wrong. Yeah. Anyone who comes over who's an avid builder is going to say you did that wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I love that there is that tension and understanding of how do you create in your toys the ability for that innovation component of it that is still something that you're driving for, yet, and that's also the difference of the collectibles, right? Like when you look at the adults, a bonsai tree, and even though bonsai trees can be whatever they want, it really isn't. You're kind of building it to what you want to have sit on your display on your shelf. So I think that's an interesting challenge that Lego has, and it's obviously Mattel has the same challenge as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gina?
It's interesting to me too. So I want to go back on the culture, and I'm going to say something a little controversial because that's what I do. We're talking about the demographic, and I think it's really interesting. We talk about the last 75 years. We can't deny that people aren't having as many kids anymore. That's a reality, right? The birth rate is actually dropping. And so as a business who is centered around toys for children, but if people aren't having as many children, it's kind of changed the makeup of how we, are exposed to Lego. So what I would say maybe 30, 40 years ago, okay, your parents had those like old Lego sets, and yet you were able, as you shared, Leo, to pass it down to someone else. And all of a sudden, no one's really having kids. So the Lego kind of disappears. And, if someone who really loved Lego, like your son, Melissa, growing up, it's, if he or if anyone's trying to have a child, you usually scratch that itch once you have a kid. But because people aren't having as many kids, you're losing some of what kind of the inheritance of Lego structures have been. And I think that's a really important piece to recognize because, yeah, we're not playing as much. And so you can see the shift from a brand knowing that if my main base is slowly declining, we need to look at what's next. And so I love this idea of, ages and stages because, my background a little bit in neuroscience and children development, there are specific pieces of like, at 0 to 6 months, a kid can do, it is just exploring and going back to like the difference between, something that's really constrictive versus something that is a little more, there's not as many little kids playing with Lego. Obviously or centered around 2+, 3+. We know the age limits on Lego, but we're not having as many of those. You can see the natural progression of, more intense sets, more sets where, very structured and centered around STEM, because when people are having less children, they're saying, I really need my kid. It's being pushed into us. They need to get into STEM.
This one's got to work. This one's got to work.
So you can see, get a job now at 2 years old. And if you're not working, we can't help you. And so you can't ignore these like societal things that are happening in the background,
Absolutely.
which completely changes how we play and what we think of play now. And so I really love all of your points, but I wanted to just share that because I think that's a big fact.
You're absolutely right. It's a less target-rich environment when you're talking about a toy business. And on top of that, every toy company now has a new competitor, which is brutal, and that is a tablet. I do think there are things Lego could focus on to keep again, when you're a kid, what was so cool about Legos is I could make an airplane, and the little wheel set, those are the engines on the airplane, not the wheels. And there was a design thinking and an imagination component to it that I think the reason we all want to have the Lego bonsai or the Lego art or whatever it is because we remember that feeling, right? And so, but if you're an off-road guy, you want your Lego Defender on your desk because that's your identity. I'm Mr. Adventure Man. But I'm also a Lego nerd, and I want to remember that and represent that because of what Lego was then, which is not what it is now to kids, I don't think. So to years,
You have the open-ended toy box, right? The pieces do what you want, use your imagination, and you have a block. It's a big blue block, and then you have two things that represent tires, and then you got a car. You're off and running. Versus this very instructive play, which geared toward an older mentality or an adult mentality. But also, let's not forget, Lego is not purely an analog company. You mentioned screens, Leo. There have been, 3 Lego movies. There's a Lego adult-focused or teen or family-focused TV show called Lego Masters that feature the adults as the ones engaging and interacting with these really sophisticated Lego builds. You've got the expansion into all these different IPs because Lego's got their own IP, but but they keep it fairly generic on purpose, so that's very adaptable. But even like the Lego movie, I had to look and see what was the main character's name is Emmett. It's not as sticky, their internal IP, so they have to go out to these licensing deals and arrangements. Otherwise, who's going to go near it? Do you want to build the pirate ship that looks like it's from when Lego started, or do you want the latest Marvel movie that's coming out? So there's now, there is, in a way, there's no faulting them for continuing to diversify their product line, diversify their audience reach, and looking at who wants it, where we'll make it. Just tell us you want it.
Well, and Tino brought up a really good point around the changing culture of our children and their development and what they have access to and what they're exposed to. Because for me, the thing about Legos is they're tactile, right? The snap, like getting it to actually work was such a cool thing when it actually snapped in the right way. It was very, rectangular. When the wheels came, that was like a huge thing. That was huge. You're used to having these square things and then trying to make it look curved, and it wasn't curved. So you'd stack your Legos a certain way. And so to me, I feel like that is not something kids today have the patience for and the bandwidth for. Like you see kids get 2-year-olds get upset in their strollers when the cartoon ends, right? And they're swiping and there's nothing there, and it's just, it's amazing to me that this is something that we are all dealing with as a culture. So I love to understand deeper. I mean, as culture, as development of children's minds and adults changes over the years, the recognition that that's not what people want anymore is really something interesting. Yet at the same time, we have all these vintage things coming back. Like all of a sudden, everybody wants to go back to 1980s, which I'm like, no, please no. And you see that when you go in and look at games, Monopoly, they're all going back, Trouble, they're all going back to the old look.
Uno, yep.
Right? And which I love. I think that's very, very cool. But at the same time, we're not, there is this want for something that's reminiscent. And what about if Lego were to, lean into the kids side and maybe have these sub brands like adults and then kids? I don't know. Maybe Leo and Aaron, you could talk about that. But then they could have a starter kit and it'd be the OG, and they could have a couple different things like, oh, you can build a house with this, you could build a train, an airplane, whatever you want. And we've got, you've got 20 white bricks, you've got, so many red bricks, 2 windows, whatever it might be, and go to it and like ask them to send them in, right?
Well, it's really interesting to get another contrary take because, that nostalgia is coming back and we talk about iPad kids. And there's also a weird swing in culture too, where there are parents who are super against that. And so you hear brands like Lovevery that are a subscription-based, which is so crazy, a subscription-based toy company where they have developmental toys for your kids' development. So from 0 to 3, or okay, when your kid starts grabbing and exploring, and when they want to smash, here are all the different things they can do. And you're seeing a return to more of that tactile because studies have shown, again, we're talking about attention and ADHD kind of on a rise and different kind of situations, because yes, kids' brains, there's a lot more synapses, a lot more things firing because of what they're exposed to, but there's only so much they can manage and handle. And so you can see there's also now this weird swing of kind of like the anti-screen parent who are looking for more of these tactile things as well. So it's also another interesting point too to share. But Leo, you go for it.
No, you beat me to it, So, I've seen there are a lot of people my age now with kids that are coming up into the teenage years, and I'm hearing a lot of people are commenting on how, maybe I shouldn't have let my kid have an iPhone. Maybe social media isn't for kids under 16. Aaron, you talked about the Lego movie, and a point I want to get out there. That whole movie was about what we're talking about, which was the dad. Will Ferrell, I think, was the dad, and he was like gluing his sets together and wanted this perfect city and this perfect world. And he was represented in the kids' narrative as the evil overlord guy that was locking everybody in with the glue cannon thing. Remember that? But you also had the Batman. You had all these like IP characters in there, right? Leveraged in a really cool way. But the message was about open-ended play and having an open mind and being flexible and accepting. So Lego knows. They know what's going on, right? And it actually made for a really emotional. I don't know if you guys watched that movie. I loved it. It was very emotional. And that end scene where the kid is like, "Dad, I just want to play," and the dad had forgotten. So I thought that was a really beautiful tension, and I do think at the crux of what we're trying to solve is that tension. And when I look at, I was looking through the website, Lego's website, and I was looking at Lego Technics. Now, Lego Technics kind of came in, I think, as I was getting too old for it. But when it started, it was more like, you guys remember Erectro sets? Or we didn't know what it was. More like, hey, it came with motors and like a programmable brain. I think you could learn Arduino, which is a coding language, and you could make a Lego robot and command it to do stuff. And it was very STEAM. Before that stuff was a popular topic, it was out there. It was expensive. I remember it being expensive, which is another thing I'd like us to talk about. Even as a kid, I remember my mom saying, "Whew, these Legos are expensive," right? Versus a G.I. Joe or a Transformer, which I also love. But I think when we think about, and now when we look at Lego Technics, it's all really beautiful, expensive, high detail building sets. Some of them are remote controlled. And you build them and they drive, and that's really cool. There's a thought to that, but there's no way a 9-year-old is doing that, right? And so one thing I'm wondering is what happened to Technics? What happened to the experimentation? What happened there? So with Hot Wheels, they had 3 brand pillars. I want to say they were experimentation, competition, and creativity. I think those are the 3, what's our play sets? What are we doing about those 3 things? And I wonder with Lego, I didn't really see that on the website. They had like creativity, they had things on there, but like Hot Wheels did a great job of sort of codifying what does a playset got to do. We got to have these 3 things in there. And maybe another one was measurement. I forget now. Maybe that was under competition, but there were a set of things that every playset had to offer on some level. And I look at just to zoom in on Technics or Lego Technics because the line is so big. Why not? Bring back the builderly, and why not have the kids grade Lego Technics, Technics Junior, which is the bigger, simpler blocks, but they still can do a thing. It can walk, it can roll. Why not kill the community? Why not build content around that?
Yeah. Well, and kids can figure those things out too. And, it says 12 and up, and you've got a 6 or 7-year-old that's blasted their way through it. And it's another proof point that Lego is not they're not Lincoln Logs, right? They're not like old world. Like they move into these spheres where they've got these immersive kits that do functions and have motors. They've got the smart brick now that is just coming out that we'll see what happens with that. And they're not screen shy. Like they've got the movies, like we said, they've got video games that do very well. They've got the theme parks. When you go to a theme park and you get on a ride, they sit you down in front of a screen. which is terrifying. I think they've experimented with augmented reality at the parks too, and things like that. So they're not living in the past; like they're cognizant of how people consume, and even the parents that are backing away from the all screens all the time. Now there's a range of options to choose from. So you can go back to the set in a box, or you can get as high tech as you want.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing they could try to do operationally is use those adult profits to subsidize kind of kid first innovation and figure out how, there are very specific segments that they are leaning towards in each of these different brands, right? Techniques, all the different types of things that they're trying to do. And so they really have to kind of come up with their own personal, it feels like a little culture crisis, or they're here, got flip personality here. Because I don't think that they're leaning away from innovation for kids, but it's also that kids are different than they used to be. And to your point, Leo, you don't have a show on Friday night at 7:00 that you're waiting for to watch Dukes of Hazzard, right? You have to actually, and you actually are building things with your hands. You're, selling pictures to your neighbors to try to get money. So you buy bubble gum or a comic book. And that's such a different time, right? So it is interesting to kind of see how can they incorporate that with the times today and make it as relevant as possible. And I think the partnerships that, for example, Mattel has done, like on the Barbie movie and in other arenas, is the same kind of thing that Lego has done in the past with Star Wars, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, creating those big sets. But Leo, to your point, those sets at those times were so expensive, like no one really could afford them, right? And that's the thing that Legos need to be accessible to everybody and not just to the very, very, very rich,
Yeah.
Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, and very rich is not an exaggeration. The Technic stuff when I was younger, I mean, that was way out of reach. And, a buddy of mine in my 20s, he started building a family, and their first pregnancy rather, was twins. And he was like, man, I tell you what, he was a designer like me, so he's very concerned about the aesthetic of his home. And he's like, man, you have twins, just be ready for all the cool to leave your house. There's stuff everywhere. And I think when you buy a Lego set as a parent, it's going to go everywhere. And so when it's really expensive and your kid's really young, you're going to be stepping on Legos. I mean, one of that Lego did a funny thing and actually built Lego-proof slippers for parents because they kept stepping on Legos. That was a great move they did. But I do think there's a tension there, but also an opportunity. One of the more sinister things you talk about as a toy company is pipeline. And how do you grow your consumer base? How do you grow these kids into, how do you grow with them? How do you get them into your system and grow with them, right? Hot Wheels did a lot of that work. Fisher-Price did a lot of that work. And if I'm Lego, I'm probably looking at what's happening in culture. And Chino, you probably know more about this than I do. But what makes a trend, what bursts a trend, it's usually what's absent. What is absent from culture? It might be bell bottoms, it might be low rise, but whatever hasn't been happening that somebody cool comes out and does again and they bring it back. If I'm Lego, I'm probably wondering what's absent. And that builderly geekery is pretty absent from kids. Now, there are brands focused on just that, right? But Lego was kind of the original brand that inspired all that. And so when you think about your pipeline, you think about growing them into your system. And again, saying that about kids is rough, but that is the reality, right? If you want to make money selling toys, that's what you're thinking about. Why don't they create a Lego Technics like thing that is very STEM oriented that is affordable. Maybe it's a subscription that grows with your kid. Maybe, and that's how they offset the price and get mom and dad involved. The other thing that I remember very fondly with both of my parents was the co-play, right? And sometimes dad had to help you get through, the tough part of the build because you just couldn't figure it out. You get frustrated. You put one piece on backwards, 3 steps back, and now it's not working. Mom or dad had to come in and bail you out. And those were great memories. So that's the other thing, is there an opportunity to get the family involved, get the unit involved, whatever that unit looks like, in a membership or in a community that, that makes Lego sort of like, that anticipation. Another huge thing right now for kids on YouTube, it's been this way for a while. I don't know if I think they've actually intentionally played it down because it was kind of bad for kids, but unboxing, getting new toys, getting new stuff. Kids are obsessed with unboxing. So imagine if Lego, I know I'm going into the solution now, I can't help myself, but is there an opportunity to go back to this builderly open-ended play thing, foster that anticipation and that like, I'm waiting for my monthly Lego drop. I don't know what it is. It's a mystery box. I don't know. And also engaging mom and dad to co-play with the kid. Is there, imagine every third Thursday, it's Lego day and something's coming in the mail, man. And guess what? You got an email with content and here's all the other kids that built and what they did with it. What are you going to do? Upload it. That's what I remember. And so when I look at that, I get a little fraction of piece. That's going to be missing if they're not addressing the younger kids and creating both those moments inside their head, right? Hey man, this is a laptop. I have a computer now. I have a cannon. I have a helicopter. They need to bring that back. And also those memories with mom and dad that stick, right? I mean, I think without that, there may be a risk of the nostalgia adult play maybe waning because that those anchors won't be there.
All right. Well, you're building us toward our fix. So I've got ideas. I like everything I'm hearing. I'm gonna pull this into this is a strategy. This is gonna happen, at least on our show. So what we're gonna do, Leo, I love the subscription box, right? I think I was part of a book club type of thing where you got to pick every month. You got to say, do you want this one or this one? Do you want this type of thing? And every month it was like, oh, I can't. It was a book, yeah. So think about a play set for a 3-year-old. So we're going to go that route. We're going to call it, for now, we'll call it Lego for Life. So whatever age or stage you're at, you start getting appropriate recommendations. Maybe there's upcharges, like, if you want this licensed one that's kind of tie in with the movie that's coming out, you pay a little more. If you like what you got at your level, you're good. But the subscriptions are going to start with, we'll call it an anything box, right? And that doesn't have instructions, doesn't tell you what to do. It's your starter kit. And we're going to tie in a social media challenge for those who want to play along. I think Chino or Melissa, you said it earlier, like, show us what you did with it. And that gets everyone involved, and it's open-ended. And those that want to stay on the open-ended track, their next kit is open-ended. You know what I mean? And like, okay, so we got our subscription, we got our Lego for Life, we got our open-ended kit, which is affordable and accessible to everybody. And you start, maybe you start or end there. You don't have to stay for life. And then when you get to the adult or the really sophisticated or the higher priced, the black box range that's got the nice packaging, maybe you call it this isn't their final name, but call it Go by Lego or something, that tells you, you don't have to call it a new brand and take it all away from the full identity, but give it some type of denomination that says, look, this is a different section of the house, right? We understand you've got more, you got more resources to throw at this. We understand you are adult or toward the adult, and we're gonna make these really intricate, pixel perfect, but in real life representations of things, and it's gonna be outside of our line. But if you're here for the Lego side of the house, you're gonna get the STEM things, you're going to get the kits that you like, you're going to get tie-ins and products. You probably are going to get incentives to come to our theme park and come to watch the next Lego Batman we make and all those things. So it's a channel to the hearts and minds of consumers. But let's go the subscription route. Let's get that going. And when retail falters, like we know it will, and that becomes a liability to have a Lego store in all the malls, they're in there good. So, did I miss anything? What if we do that?
I love it. I mean, the G and the O and go, or the G and the O from the Lego logo. I see you, Aaron. I see where you're going. I see it. I see it.
Well, so you start. Yeah, you took us here.
That is a great idea, and I think that they need to lean into that. This is the wave of the future for them. I like the idea of, like I said earlier, using the other brand lines like the adult Go Lego to help subsidize that kid first innovation, and so to keep those prices down, right, for the fundamental kits and the subscription. And I think it would be a great thing for them to also think about utilizing Legos in ways that they haven't before and partnerships that they haven't before. You know, Leo, when you were speaking to the Technics, the high-end brand, I was thinking about all of the robotic clubs across
Yes.
the country and globally, right? Everybody hears this all the time. My youngest is an aerospace engineer right now, major at the robotics stuff that they are trying to do, right? And they're given a very limited budget to make something, do something. And I think, wow, wouldn't that be great if Lego was helped sponsor some of that in the middle school era, in the high school era to help. And then these big competitions when you get to college where it's just you know, those kids grew up with Legos. That would be like the trophy of all trophies to say quad Lego robotics. Oh my God, right? You know, and to have that sponsorship, and it would be just a great thing. And I love, you know, integrating it with the social media side of it. So you're kind of keeping it relevant and out there. And I love like showcasing how you're building it. I was at a startup company, and for our profile pics in Slack, we all picked the little Lego people,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep.
which was kind of funny, right? You know, so you kind of pick who your little Lego person was. So that was, you know, but like I think that there's a great way to integrate all of that. So I love what you said, Aaron. And I also think on the sustainability side, we didn't talk about not just the paper, but like, can you send them in? Can you send them in and they can get them cleaned, and then they can sort them, and then they can provide those to schools or other places and other, you know, center. I think that this is a fix that is the alignment of all of those things, right? The culture, the mission, the strategy, the operations, and the customer segment and consumer. So this is I think, Aaron, you did a great job of kind of summarizing how that all works. And then I'm sure, Chino, you might have some other closing thoughts, because I know you were kind of you weren't the naysayer, were you? You weren't that wasn't what you were. You were just bringing up some true concerns from, you know,
Culture perspective.
people side. Yeah.
And I guess
Chino.
I'll close here. So I think we can all, and our listeners can agree, you know, play leads to creativity, which leads to innovation, point blank. I think what Lego needs to remember is that play is important, and it doesn't matter what stage that could be. And when we're looking at their actual brand, hello, Lego, if you're listening, this is some really good insight. Pay us, sponsor us. But I think if you reframe your brand of, it's not just about children. We're finding the kid in you. We're playing with the kid inside of you. That's not maybe right. We can workshop the copy there, but that is the essence. And if we can hit it at each stage, a subscription model, as we've talked about, but also, yeah, not ignore that the big money is with the adults looking to do this. Let's rebrand it and say the kid in them. And we're playing with the kid in them. Again, let's work on that copy. But I think it kind of takes all the tension that we're having in terms of what does your brand mean anymore. And if you can remember just those 3 pillars, I think Lego could be good. So listen, you hear us, call us.
Smart. Leo, if we play into the the community development and the cultural sensibilities, and we do the subscription model and all those good things, did we fix Lego? Did we fix their situation?
Yes, I think so. I think that you've given them permission to take the long view. and you've incentivized them internally to do the thing they probably already know they need to do. There are a lot of smart people there. I've met people from Lego. It's a great organization, and we need to cut them loose. We need to liberate them to do what they probably already know they need to do. And I think it's still a privately held, a privately owned company. So somebody there is thinking of the long view. They're thinking of legacy. And I think this is a path to that. This is a path to creating that pipeline in that future consumer base, while more aggressively asserting your brand values and your purpose and your mission. I think it's a win. I'm excited a lot.
Good. Well, that's going to wrap up our episode on Lego. I think our combined fixes fit together nicely, and I hope we didn't miss any critical pieces. If we did, please let us know at wefixeditpod.com. Before we go, Leo, it's been an absolute blast having you on, and tell our listeners how they can keep up with what you're doing now.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. This was way too fun. The two businesses I'm leading right now, one of them is called Fluid Logic. And we've got a whole new brand strategy, brand identity, product line coming out in the spring. Go to Instagram at Fluid Logic. Follow us there. We're going back into motorsports and power sports and on into athletics. It's going to get really exciting really fast. Also, Midnight Rally Club, just at Midnight Rally Club. That is my off-road helmet brand. Again, in the spring, we've got a whole bunch of products coming out. New apparel, new gloves, and some racing product that we're really excited about. So at Midnight Rally Club, at Fluid Logic, follow those on Instagram and keep your eyes open February through April. And there's going to be some explosive change coming. Thank you guys for having me. This was killer. Very fun. Very, very fun.
Thanks, Leo.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks again to Leo Battersby. Thank you, Melissa, for giving us the rundown. Thank you, Chino, for your amazing perspectives. Again, you can keep up with all our episodes at wefixeditpod.com. And we're great company while you're building those 1,000-piece sets. They're not going to build themselves. And we will see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of We Fixed It, You're Welcome. We go into every episode somewhat cold, and nothing we say should be construed as legal advice, financial advice, or anything that would get us in trouble. All trademarks, IP, and brand elements remain property of their respective owners.